Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström, and with me is my co-host.
Malena Hjerpe.
And our podcast is basically all about sewing, including what it's like running a sewing business. And in today's episode, we're going to make a very bold claim that is actually true as well, is that if we count all the years that we have sewn and add these up into one, together we have sewn for over 70 years. That's pretty impressive.
That's a lifetime, yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole lifetime, right? And hopefully we have had a few revelations on this long journey. So we thought it would be fun to do an episode where we talk about the stuff that we have learned, important lessons, or maybe mindset shifts and other things that perhaps could be useful for you as well to hear. I guess I think if I look at the statistics from our listeners, I can see that a lot of people are around the same age as us. So I know that there are lots of other long-time sewers, and if you are perhaps a bit more fresh into sewing, hopefully you can learn from us veterans to perhaps not do some of the mistakes as well, because that has also, at least I have a few of those that I can definitely share today as well. So Malena, do you remember when you first began sewing and what it was like and what you made?
Yeah, it was in school. We had it as I don't know what to call it, like home economic or something.
Home economics, yeah. I think that's the word, English word.
So, yeah, we learned to sew in school. I'm very happy about that. And I have talked about this on a podcast before, but the first garment for me was a t-shirt and a pair of shorts in jersey, like single jersey fabric. This was during the 90s, so I was teeny tiny when I was young, and if I don't have the garments, I don't know where they are anymore. Probably threw them away at some point, but I think they would still be oversized on me as an adult. It was, in the 90s when it was oversized a t-shirt, it was humongous. It was huge. So yeah, nothing form-fitting here whatsoever. But yeah, that was it was like a PJ set, a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. That was my first. The actual first garment I made, it was for a doll, like a troll that I made in school as well, and then I made like a vest for it. Basically a square that I cut 2 holes in it for the arms. So that's the actual first garment I made. So
wow, impressive.
It was a long time ago, but I still remember those very, very vividly.
It's funny that we remember those first makes so vividly, especially considering the fact that it was so many decades ago. And sometimes if someone asked me to list all the things I've sewn, I probably wouldn't remember a lot of those. But I have the same type of vivid memory. I can even remember the color of the things that I made when I was, that age. So it's pretty fascinating how your memory works.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really stuck to you. What was the first thing you made?
Yeah, so I also started home economics in Sweden. I think I was 9 or 10. The first things that I sewed, we didn't do garments in home economics first. So I made a patchwork cushion like that. And I'm a little bit older than you, Malena, so I was in the 80s, which was again also very popular with oversized things, and everything that we sewed when it came to garment, they had an elastic waist. So we didn't learn to do things like insert zippers, and I think a lot of first projects was to make just a straight skirt. It was basically cut as a rectangle, and then you sew the side seam, and then you just inserted elastic. And there was also, I remember, those round knitted tubes that you could also just cut at the bottom and then again just fold over, insert elastic, and all of a sudden you had a skirt. And it was because of the elastic, it was able to fit a decent amount of varieties of bodies because it was kind of just stretched out like that. So that was also a lot of like beginner makes. But the first thing I made myself, I didn't actually do in home economics. It was a pair of pants using old bed linen, because if you find this vintage Swedish bed linen, they are usually beautiful quality, soft cotton or soft linen cotton mix. So they stand up the test of time, and they're just soft due to wear. And I don't remember, but I think I should credit my older bonus sister, I think it's called, or stepsister, because she was into sewing, and she used to make these elastic pants that, at least in Sweden, vintage bedsheets often had like a border, either a crocheted border or an embroidered border, as a decorative at the upper part of the bedsheet. And so what you did was that you took that border, either you ripped it apart or you were able to construct the pants so that the hem was the border. So you made pants using old bed sheets and duvet covers, and you just used that border as a decoration. That was it was a very small, I shouldn't say this was a popular style, but it was a very minor trend in Sweden in the early 80s. So that's what I did with the help of my ex bonus dad. His mother helped me, so she showed how to trace a pair of pants that I already had, and made a pattern, and then she showed me how to insert the elastic with the casing. And I wore those pants until they fell apart. So that was definitely a really successful project. So and that made me do a lot of repeat of that garment. So sometimes because I have my office very close to a lot of secondhand store, so I've actually thought about doing a new version, like a
Oh,
summer
that would
pattern.
be so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, do that.
with elastic waist. And now if you go and look in stores, elastic waists are everywhere, not just for pyjama pants. It's been, even on menswear, I've seen a lot of elastic waist now for dressier pants. So I should probably venture down and do that as well. And I think I was about 11, and I'm turning 53 this year, so I can confident say that I've sewn garments over 40 years. So it's such fun to go back. And again, as I said, I remember that the band was pink and white, and I remember the feel of the fabric, how soft it was. So I have lots of fine memories of those early sewing projects. It was special. It was kind of
Yeah,
magic.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
definitely.
mm.
So, what is your first thing on your list? What have you learned during your years of sewing, or what do you wanna
Yeah.
start with?
Yeah, the first one I have on my list, which is something I definitely have to relearn. I got a little bit better over time, but I've skipped this very important lesson so many times, and that is I put it like this: don't trust your judgment, always double check. Because
Sounds like the seam ripper has been working a
it's
lot
always,
here.
yes, I have several seam rippers because I don't want to be without one in case it happens again. I have a tendency of getting into like a flow state, and I also have a tendency of sometimes getting a bit overly confident because I've sewn something several times. So that's why I, for instance, have been prone to sometimes piece together panels where the wrong side is facing up, and on the other panel, the right side is facing up. Which you don't really see if it's a dark fabric. For instance, if you're sewing like a black jersey, for instance, if you don't have good lighting, it's really difficult to see. So that's why I'm a big fan of marking the right side and wrong side if you're doing this kind of tricky fabrics. And another thing is that I've also not done notching properly. So I set in like the left sleeve in the right arm opening. and the opposite, of course. And then I just been like, why doesn't it fit so well? And sometimes, I'm not doing this anymore, but I mean, I've sewn for a long time. Sometimes I've decided that I've cut the pieces wrong, so I trimmed it away with a scissor. So all of a sudden, I can't even sew it together because I ruined the sleeve caps.
Yeah, and
I'm a messy
you've seen
sewist,
those
yeah.
pictures in Facebook groups with, I mean, Someone has been sewing late in the night, or are just tired, or just didn't double check and accidentally sewed the sleeve onto the neckline instead of the armhole. And I mean, we're not laughing at you; we're laughing with you.
Yeah.
Like those, it could,
everything.
you have that feeling. It's like, this doesn't look right. Oh well, I'll just go and sew. And you have that feeling, but you don't listen to it, and it turns out, it wasn't right.
Yeah, because what you say, you have that hunch or magkänsla, as we say in Sweden, like that feeling in your stomach, that something
like
is
something
wrong.
is
gut
off
feeling,
here.
right? That's the word. Yeah, and you still refuse to listen to it, and that's where you make the most crazy decision. I mean, another classic thing that I've definitely done too is when you're sewing a pair of pants, and instead of joining the front and the back piece, I've joined the front inseams instead, so I end up with a skirt. And so lots of crazy stuff like that happens for sure, and so it's a good thing. I mean, it's easy to say, but spend that extra second or sometimes minute to just double check that you're actually attaching the right piece. And also, of course, double check with the instructions as well, because sometimes it's easy to think, especially when you get more experience, and you think, oh, I know better than the instructions, because I've been sewing for a long time. And sometimes you do, but sometimes there's a point of the instruction that maybe you're supposed to do it in a specific order and to achieve the best result, rather than having an idea of what you think is best. So you have to be humble, I think, and not be overly confident. That's a good lesson to learn. And also, of course, making sure that you do notches properly and you mark pieces. So, for instance, if you have similar pieces, panels like that you have a system, like you mentioned previously, Malena, that you pin the pattern piece to the panels to make sure that you have the information still there and which panel is which. So those are just simple things that I think you should make it a habit of always trying to remember. So have you done mistakes like that, Malena, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, of course. Things like also sewn the sleeve inside out, so it's like the back is it's turned inside out basically when you sew it, and it's just a lot of. And I mean, to the point that when I sewn a ball gown for myself, I mean, a more simple styled ball gown, I mean, it ended up in the trash on the street. Like, so yeah, I've done my mistakes as well.
Yeah. It's kind of part of the learning journey. Yeah, definitely. So don't feel bad at yourself. You do mistakes. We all do them, and that's why we have a seam ripper. And that's why we also do this podcast, because it's good always to remind both ourselves and everyone else that it's always good to take the time and do things right. So, Malena, what is your first lesson that you've learned?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is more a little bit business related, maybe. And it is like, should you or should you not monetize your business? Like, should you earn on your business? I haven't heard this myself, but I mean, when you read on social media and people get comments like that you should make not a living, but like, when do you earn back the money you have spent on your hobby, basically? And that's a little bit weird thing to say about someone's hobby. Hobby is something that you do for enjoyment. It should be fun, it should be relaxing, it should be purely pressure. I mean, how many usually men, how often do they make back the money they spend on golf clubs, courses, or fishing equipment? Like, we don't ask men those kind of things, so why do we have to monetize or like make back money on our hobby? Just because, garments you can sell, but why would we if we want to keep it as a hobby? And also, if you do decide to make it into a business, which, I mean, go for it if you want, remember that it might take the joy out of it. If you sew just for pleasure, just for fun, if you do it into a business, it has to be efficient for you to actually earn money. So think very careful before if you choose to go down that path. Is it really worth it? Because I mean, I do work with this. I love it. I haven't regretted it at all, but it took away the hobby aspect for it. So I'm still looking for, well, what is my hobby? Gardening is now my hobby. Yeah. And I've chosen actively like, no, I will never monetize gardening because then it will add on pressure to perform, to do well. And it's like, no, that should be purely joyful for me. So if you want to keep your hobby a hobby, forget about all those things about, I mean, fine, it's a little bit economical thinking might be good in your hobby as well, because it is an expensive hobby. But you don't, I mean, earning on your hobby, that should not be like a, how can I say, a demand or like a factor. Like if you enjoy doing it, that's worth the time and money spent on it.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, and I definitely agree with you. And I think a tangent to that is, I'm sure all of you that are listening to this podcast and probably heard or asked, oh, you should charge and, you know, have people do orders and you can create garments for people, or don't you do custom work, or I have a zipper, do you know how to fix it, or I need a...
Can you sew this for me?
Can you sew this for me? So it's kind of tangent to that, and again, you have to understand like where your pleasure zone is, and perhaps that is not to put any type of pressure on your sewing. Instead, just enjoy it for your own sake. And I agree with you. It's a good point you brought up about that, how we might devalue sewing as not like a valuable hobby. It has to be, how should I put it? It has to be validated monetarily, which I think is such a weird way of seeing it. It's the same. I mean, if someone buys a boat as a hobby, a sailboat or a motorboard, I mean, who are you supposed then to take on guests and drive around in the boat to make up for the fact that you borrowed or spent a lot of money on a boat? No, I mean, you're supposed to do it for yourself for fun, and I can, from what I've heard, a boat is a bigger money pit than sewing will ever be, apparently.
Yeah, so we shouldn't feel bad about spending money on our hobby. Like that's fine. That's not a problem. Like if you want to prioritize that.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So my next lesson is that I shouldn't assume that the pattern designer can read my mind.
What?
Yeah,
everything is not custom made for you, specifically.
Yeah, I know,
you?
It's such a bummer. I'm so upset about this. No, we're joking. No, but this is, I think, a common thing that I think we all have to learn in one way or another, and that is to understand that there are so many things that goes into a design, and we cannot assume that the designer knows exactly the amount of ease or length, for instance, on a sleeve, or where the bodice should hit on your hips, and of course, that the designer has a size chart that magically is exactly the same as your body. You can find a size that is exactly the same. Now that we say this, of course, it sounds like obvious, but I think this is something that everyone that starts out sewing has to realize. And especially back in the days when I started sewing, there were very rarely photos on most pattern envelopes. They were just sketches, and they are usually very idealized and idealistic. For instance, the waist was super narrow, especially when you look at vintage illustrations. Just because the waist is super narrow on the illustration doesn't mean that the waist is super narrow, because it is adjusted for what actually people look like. So for me, I mean, what I'm trying to say here is that you have to check these things. I mean, you have to check these, bring out your measuring tape, check everything. So even though you pick your size, it mostly corresponds to your body. you still have to figure out things like ease, for instance, and that's just before, that we go into fitting as well. I mean, you also have to understand that this is just a basic sizing guide, and that can also vary from different pattern companies. So just because you're a size 10 or a size 38 in one pattern company, that doesn't mean that it automatically translates to the next designer. So you always have to double check these things, do samples, measuring, compare to, if you have a garment that is similar, that you like, check that and see, does the waist on the pants hit at the spot where you want the waistband to hit, or is it too high or too low? All these things you have to figure out. I think especially a good point of that is the waist. I mean, a lot of us are not 100% straight from the waist down to the hips, so there's a little bit curving going around the tummy area. So depending on where the pants or the skirt hit on the waist, that will be a big difference on the actual size of the waistband. So you have to figure those things out as well. So understanding that and being humble about that, they are doing a specific design, and it's our job to make sure that it fits with our personal vision and our unique needs and all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, clothes in ready-to-wear, store garments, they are made according to standardized size charts, and sewing patterns are usually following similar standardized size charts. And if you have trouble finding clothes in the stores, your body differs compared to these standardized size charts, which most bodies do. You also have to make adjustments to the patterns. To fit your unique body. So if you have difficulty, you will have the same issues. What I'm basically saying is, if you're buying clothes and if you just sew a pattern straight off, you usually have the same fitting issues, unless you find a designer that has more a specific body type or something that suits you more. So yeah, have it as you probably always need to do some adjustments to the pattern to fit your body. Have it as a expectation that's probably something you need to do. Then you don't need to be sad or bummed out that it doesn't fit you perfectly, because it's you everyone is unique, so it's tricky to it's impossible to make a pattern that fits everybody. You can't do that. You can't expect that either. So be prepared to do adjustments on your patterns.
Yeah, very, very important. I think that's a lesson that we all learn eventually. For me, for instance, before I realized that I was, I knew I was short. It wasn't that, but that I had to adjust the pattern. So because I'm short, I have a short upper body. That means that the most narrow part, if I don't do a petite alteration, the most narrow part of the upper body on the bodies will end up on my stomach, which is not the most narrow part on my body. And that's the same issue I have ready-to-wear. So for instance, I cannot buy fitted ready-to-wear because they are usually drafted for a sizing that is almost 4 inches taller than I am. So that means that the waist is way down. So that's a very good example But it took me several makes before I realized that I had this reoccurring problem that I couldn't button a blouse around the tummy, but that was because the waist and the most narrow part was at my navel, not my waistline.
Yeah, and I read some Reddit threads about people are being so angry at the designers, pattern designers, that they don't add adjustment lines for, like, if you want to shorten or lengthen your pattern. And this really obviously depends on what kind of pattern it is. And I have had testers to say this to me as well, like, can you add these lines so they know where to lengthen or shorten the pattern? But for me, as a pattern maker, how am I supposed to know where you need to lengthen or shorten the pattern? I have no idea about that. On some specific things, then you can have like a generalized, here you can add or remove. But on most things, it's like, well, it depends. On a regular t-shirt, if you are very petite, the height difference is quite a lot, then maybe you need to make the whole, I mean, we talk about this in our book Fit for Knits, that maybe you need to spread out the placements where you remove the height. Maybe a little bit in the armhole so the whole shoulder and neckline is lowered, and maybe a little bit under, like in between chest and waist, so that also becomes a little bit shorter, and maybe it's between waist and hip as well, so that becomes a little bit shorter. So you spread them out, the placements. It really depends. I can't tell from the beginning, like here you always need to adjust it. And sometimes if you have a straight pair of pants and you want to make them longer or shorter, you can just add it to the bottom hem. Then you don't need to add them at specific places or anything. So it really depends on the design, the pattern, and your specific body. So, I mean, I have added lengthening lines on most of my patterns just to give like a hint, like this is usually where you want to do it. But it really depends. It's tricky to say.
It's very tricky to say, and I also add lines because I appreciate, because they give me something to as a starting point when I need to do pattern alterations, as I have to do these petite and as you say, there's so many different ways where you can be shorter or longer. So for instance, the distance between my waist and my crotch area, that is standard sizing. So for me, my shortness is mostly between the neck and the waist. That's where I'm super short. So if I would fold down the hem, it wouldn't help, because I have to do all the alterations really high up on my body.
It's everybody's unique, and like I always like try to advocate for body neutrality. Like nothing is good, nothing is bad. It is what it is. But try to figure out maybe, and this might be a little bit triggering, like how does your body differ from the standardized body? And I'm using the biggest air quotes possible now. Not that it's any, like no difference is good or bad. It just is. So, but that will give you a hint instead of how to adjust the patterns, like where to add the width, remove width, or add height, remove height, just so you know. But it just is what it is. Like nothing is no good or bad. It's just your body. It's just your personal body.
And that can be really, I think, liberating in a way to understand that we all have to do adjustments, and that also is a way of, in a way, again, it's like a cliche, but a little bit empowering with sewing, that the fact that if you don't feel that ready-to-wear is serving you well, because they have to use a specific, they try to find the most common between as much as a biggest consumer base as possible, but that means that it also ends up not serving a lot of people as well, and with sewing you have that power in your hand to actually make any pattern, any style fit you if you have those skills. And
take advantage of it.
And we talk a lot about this in our book Fit for Knits as well, and we show all the different length variations, especially when you talk about pants as well, when you have to alter them, when you can do either your hem or other areas of the body. So check that book out. Shameless plug, it's a great book. 5 stars on Amazon.
That's amazing. Thank you for all those reviews, and we love to read the reviews. By the way, thank you so much for them. It doesn't matter what people say. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. It does. Definitely. And it kind of always stings a little bit when you don't get a 5-star review and someone says something a little bit less.
Yeah, it's our baby.
I mean, we try to. But we learn from everything. Yeah.
True.
All right then, so now I'm curious about your next lesson.
Yes, I have been talking so much about this that I sometimes even forget to talk about it because it's so obvious, but pressing. The importance of pressing. I mean, that could really go from, like, again using air quotes, home sewn garment looking like finished product to a really, that's perfect garment. And press along as you sew. I mean, you can sew a few seams, but before you need to cross some seams sewing, you should have pressed it open before that, because otherwise it's not open properly, and then you sew it, and then it's sewn a little bit too closed. So don't skip pressing. That's really, and also like press the hem when the garment is still not sewn completely like together, so you can press it flat on the table. So much more easier to press compared to if you have sewn all the side seams and it's done. So press a lot, press in the right moments, and don't skip it.
Yeah, you long-time listeners will know that this is Malena's hill.
I will die on this hill.
die on the hill. But you're also so right. You're so true. And also, what I like to say is to give your the best abilities to do that. So set up your pressing station before you start sewing, because if you have to stop and bring out your iron board and set up your iron or your steaming station, you run the risk of feeling, I just want to sew a few more things until I set up my pressing station. So give yourself the best ability to success, and that is to prep these kind of things before you start to sew. Definitely.
Absolutely. And remember that all fabric does not press equally. Some fabric, takes a lot of heat, some barely no heat at all, some want to have a lot of steam, some don't. Should you press from the outside, from the inside? Like, it could also ruin a garment if you press. I have done that as well. I have burnt fabric and I pressed from the right side because that's what you see, but then the seam allowance is starting to show through and have shiny marks. So it's really important also how you press, and you always adapt to your specific fabric. A good tip for your pressing iron is to have a timer, so you don't forget. If you accidentally forget to unplug it at the end of the night, there is a timer that will shut it down automatically. Might also have been pressing a lot and was like, why is it not working? Oh, right, the timer has shut it out. I've done lots of ironing mistakes as well, but it's so worth it when you do it properly.
Yeah, very truer word has not been spoken. Keep on pressing.
Absolutely.
Yes, never skip on that. So my next lesson is to not buy stuff just because it's cheap. Because as we talked about previously when you mentioned, treating sewing as a business, sewing is a hobby with a price tag for sure. And good quality stuff tends to be quite expensive, regardless if that's a sewing machine or thread or needles or notions. So it's very tempting to look for bargains, because at least here in Sweden, and I'm sure it's the same thing in many other countries, that sometimes you can go to this like dollar store or supermarket stores, and they have these bargain bins, and they have threads in various colors that cost. You can basically buy a whole box of thread for perhaps the same price that you would pay for Gutermann or Coats or another like good quality brand thread. So I definitely understand that if you're new to sewing, especially, that it's very tempting to get a set of maybe 10 different spools of thread for just like $1 or $2. That's a nice price, but unfortunately that thread is 9 out of time, or 99% is rubbish, 100%. So why spend so much time on making a garment and then only to end up with having your thing break because you used subpar thread? I think that's a good example of a thread in particular. The same is getting cheap scissors. Not getting good quality scissors. Sometimes you can buy the 3-pack of scissors. Maybe one claims to be a fabric scissor, but it kind of like chugs through the fabric, but it isn't able to make a clear cut. So just end up, chugging the fabric and you get these uneven edges. Another obvious example is, of course, fabric. That's a tricky part. I mean, fabric is quite expensive, and sometimes it's hard to tell what a good quality fabric is and not. But oftentimes there is a correlation between the price tag and the quality of the fabric. And for instance, if you're sewing a jersey top, you don't want the jersey to start to pill or the colors to fade or the fabric to twist and everything like that the first time you wash it. So understanding how to learn how to figure out good quality fabrics and notions and familiarize yourself with good brands when it comes to needles and thread and things like that. To me, this is not a situation where you should be skimpy and try to make a deal, and that goes for sewing machines as well. I mean, if you're just maybe hemming a pair of pants a year, you can definitely do with the supermarket sewing machine, I'm sure. But I mean, I know the people that are listening to this podcast are serious about sewing, so I think we all know that a good quality sewing machine is the best bet for to make sewing enjoyable. Definitely.
Yeah, you avoid so many, not mistakes, but like skip stitches and those kind of things if you have a proper machine and a proper thread, because sometimes, the machine is perfect, settings are perfect, but the thread is, as you said, it's bad quality, and then it's going to be skip stitches. Or when you sew, after a while, it actually tears apart the thread, like it breaks when you sew because it's not strong enough. So, no. The only thing cheap fabric, I buy a lot of, not a lot, but when I see some really cheap fabric, like that I know that this has similar qualities that compared to garments that I want to sew, then I buy that to use as a sample fabric. So I sew samples, like I don't even hem them, I maybe sew just the details, I just sew it for fit. It's not intended to be worn properly or anything. That's the only time that I buy cheap clothes or cheap fabrics. But then you have to really be mindful that they has to be kind of similar to the actual fabric. Otherwise, the sample is just going to be misleading if it has super stretchy fabric and then the actual garment is not going to have as much stretch. Then it's not going to, the prototype is not going to give you any valuable information, basically. But that's the only time that if I see something cheap, I buy it just for that kind of sake.
Yeah, but that's also because you have a purpose with it, and I agree with you. There's a time and a place for not spending a lot of money. You don't want to do that when you make samples and have no idea if it's going to be a wearable garment or not. That's a very good point. And speaking about sewing machines, I mean, good quality sewing machines, they have a hefty price tag, that's for sure. I mean, when we talk about brands like Bernina and Baby Lock and similar, Yuki, I mean, they do cost a lot. And so one way is, of course, to see if you can find a used and well-serviced machine that is working. Then you're able to get a good quality machine without having to pay full price. So that's one thing. And of course, save up and over time you may be able to invest and take one sewing machine at a time. For instance, if you start with a sewing machine, then if your budget allows it, you could invest in a serger as well, so you don't have to buy all the machines at first. You can do a lot of things with just a regular sewing machine. But we are very aware and we are about the fact that it's pricey. If we want to have good results, it's going to cost a lot, but it's still cheaper than a boat.
Exactly.
Unless it's like
so
like a small tree boat or a kayak, maybe. Maybe kayak is probably more expensive. So that's and also I'm sure we can find, and I'm sure a set of golf clubs, good quality. I mean, they're probably similar to a good quality sewing machine as well, if not more. So if anyone here is also a golfer or a boat owner, please share your experience and do a price comparison, so we are not serving you the wrong information. But I'm pretty sure a lot of hobbies are definitely more expensive than sewing.
Yeah, so true. I also had it as a point, having the right tools, but you can also keep it very simple. I mean, you will get I mean, you don't have to. I always recommend Fisker's scissors, but you don't have to have the specific fabric scissors. You can also have just a regular universal scissors from Fisker's. Those one are a little bit smaller compared to the fabric scissors. But if you have a smaller hand, then maybe the fabric scissor is too big for you. It's not comfortable. So you can have another scissor as well, a smaller one. Just make sure to keep it really sharp. Then it will work fine. So you don't have to have all these special notions, special tools just for the sake of it. You will get so far with just the standard, good quality. Like, keep it simple but good quality. And then, of course, if there are some in the industry, they have very specific things for specific needs. So obviously, for example, if you are going to do a hem, like a small pin hem for a long circle skirt, they don't fold it twice, pin it when they sew it. They don't. They have a special presser foot that folds it automatically. The seam will be perfect. So, I mean, on those kind of things, yeah, then it's so much easier to buy that specific presser foot. So you don't have to, do it all by yourself. So be mindful, and if you like buy the things that you really need, and or if this is I mean, some of this hobby is buying the nice fabric, like it's two different kinds of hobby. So just do what makes you feel happy, but know that you don't have to have all these kind of special things as well. You will get so far with just your regular home sewing machine as well. So do whatever makes you feel happy.
Yeah, very, very, very true. Great words to keep remember, and you can build up over time. You don't have to start with all the equipment. I think that's sometimes a mistake that one does, that one enjoys, one gets, I have to have the best thing of everything. So you go ahead way, way, way beyond your needs for that time. It's much better to start, as you say, with a good pair of fabric scissors, and then see if over time that you might need more things to improve your sewing and to make something easier. So you can, with a standard presser foot as well. I mean, there's so many specialty presser foot, but you can do 90% of all the things you can do with a regular presser foot. So you don't have to go out and buy everything just because you have started. So that's a way to save money for sure. And then you make more informed purchases later on, and you're able to do your research.
Yeah, so true.
So that was your tips about. Yep. Okay.
You can do next.
Yep. Yes. So another lesson that I have learned, and I have to remind myself over sometimes, is to go slow in order to speed up. And we did make an episode quite not too far ago about how to sew faster, but we also talked about this approach, that just because it's not a speeding competition, we're not doing Formula 1 sewing here. What is most important is that we sew things right. And the way we do that is to be mindful, and as I mentioned previously, to double check and have a focused approach, and do maybe prep work, for instance basting and other things that will help you achieve the kind of result that you want, and of course always do samples. So doing that prep work and being mindful in the way you learn and the way you sew, that can actually help you, because the better you get at a specific technique, the faster you will get. So if you are struggling, it's probably better to start slow, and then over time you're going to be quicker and quicker.
Yeah, that is so true. It's it was funny during that episode. The conclusion was slow down and then you will speed it up.
Yeah.
No revolutionizing the tips over here. Is like no, sorry.
Yeah, but we definitely did have a few really tangible tips on actually how to speed. But a lot of the conclusion was to do good prep work. I think that was lot of the that what a lot of tips boil down to, definitely. And I think that's a good lesson to learn. And I mean, we're not factory sewers, and we're not sew for time. Just as we talked about previously, we are talking about sewing as a hobby, and for that reason, you will be benefited by actually going slow. And I think that it has kind of shifted a little bit for marketing, because going back, and I'm sure if we have listeners here that are at the same age as me, you probably remember that back in the 80s in particular, there were a lot of sewing patterns that were kind of marketed like 4-hour pattern or quick sew, and that kind of messaging perhaps gave us the wrong idea that you will be able to whip out a garment in an evening. And depending on, of course, on the garment, but for most garment that's not realistic, especially if you're counting the cutting and marking and pressing and fusing, interfacing and things like that. It's not going to happen in 4 hours if you want to do it right.
Yeah, no, this is a complete side note, but just a comparison. Do you know the chef, the TV chef Jamie Oliver?
Yep.
I mean, he has so many different TV shows, and he had one show about speedy cooking. Like all the recipes will just take 15 minutes to make. But he had done all the prep before. He had done all the chopping, everything, and he was just sitting there on both and like, yeah, the actual cooking doesn't take that long. That's sure, no problem to make that in 15 minutes. But I mean, the prep work, that counts as well. I got so frustrated with that show. I was like, but that's a lie.
Yeah, that's a lie.
15 minutes. I mean, you have done all the prep work already, but you don't calculate that time? I mean, come on.
Oh, that's so annoying. I hate
cheating.
that. And it's also, it gets the wrong idea, because, I'm going to be able to whip up this dinner in 15 minutes. No, because you have to probably add as much time doing all the shopping and prepping and
triple that time
and
preparing everything. It was like, that's part of the cooking as well. Come on.
Yeah.
So sewing is not just the actual sewing, it's also cutting out and pressing and all the other things as well. Yeah. So it's difficult to measure.
Yeah, very, very good. So what's your next one?
Yeah, mine is why do you actually sew? Like figure out, like really think, like what is purpose of your sewing? Like, is it to wear the actual garment? Like, that's the fun, having a vision, having a design, and to be able to wear that garment later on? Or is it more the process, the actual sewing part? And then you can adjust the working method a little bit, to what your preference are. I mean, if your passion is to create fashion, to wear it, maybe the inside doesn't need to be perfect, because it's the wearing, like getting the garment to look like what you want. Maybe it's that end goal. Then, I mean, make sure that it doesn't unravel when you wash it and things like that, but it doesn't have to look perfect then on the inside. That's fine. But if it is the actual sewing process, go nuts on all the different techniques then, and do Hong Kong seams, do French seams, do the inside perfect in any way you can, and add all those little details, things. Go bananas on those kind of things, because as we talk, it is expensive. So if it is the actual sewing part, well, then sew slow with all these techniques that it makes it take longer, but you will enjoy the process a little bit more than if it is the journey that is the actual goal. If it is to actually wear the garment, and you are a little bit more speedy sewist, then maybe this is not the route for you, because that's not the thing that you enjoy. So think of really like, what is it that you actually want to do? And if it is that you don't really care about the end garment, like you don't need to wear it, maybe you have someone in your family you can sew for instead, and make it a thing that they get to wear it instead. So it doesn't just become a garment that nobody wears, because obviously we want that to happen in the end. So really figure out what is it that you enjoy about this, because again, as I've talked, it's a hobby, this is your pleasure. Make sure to emphasize on the pleasure part when doing this, so you actually enjoy it. Otherwise you might lose your sojo, your mojo for sewing, and then you won't do it if you don't focus on the right parts.
Yeah, very wise words, very wise word. And to find your why, I think that's so important. And because we are always peppered with other people's approaches and messages and visuals. I mean, the wonderful thing that we have today is the sewing internet, but that can also create ideas that maybe we should be something else, or we should do it in a different way, instead of just looking inside and why are we doing this. So it's very important, I think, with all this noise around us, to stay true to what our purpose is, and that goes for a lot of things in life, and I agree with you, it definitely goes for sewing as well.
Yeah, so true. It's like, I don't enjoy the sewing maybe so much because I want to get to the end result so fast. So it's like, then all those details on the inside, it's like, that's just gonna take a long time for me. So I don't enjoy doing that. So then I'm not gonna spend my time on that because I have very limited time. I want to focus on the right thing. And also when I was younger, when I sewed more clothes for myself, I always chose to sew a little bit more fancy garments, like for parties, or if I was going as a guest on a wedding or something, like I sewed those garments, because those garments are really, really expensive also in store. But to make those garments for yourself, obviously depending on what kind of fabric you choose, then you can actually get it for quite cheap compared to if you buy those kind of garments. So that was also a fun thing for me, to be able to make a little bit more special garments and to save a little bit of money on those things. I haven't obviously worn them so many times then, unfortunately, but it has been more of special projects, and it has been more fun for me than just compared to making a regular everyday garment. I do that more today. Now I actually wear my I have very basic patterns, for example, and I wear those samples basically every day. I have my field fair joggers every single day almost. So it's a huge difference compared to when I was younger. But again, you do you, like, you do whatever suits you best at this time in your life. Like, if it's your hobby, make sure that you enjoy it.
Yeah. Very, very wise, very, very wise word. So, did you have any more left? Was that your...
Well, I have one
more,
very specific thing.
Yeah.
Adjusting the foot pressure tension. How do you say? How much the pressure foot should actually press onto your fabric.
The tension, yeah.
Play around with that.
Light or heavy tension.
Yeah.
Pressure.
Exactly.
Pressure
like
on the
pressure
foot. Pressure. This is going to be like a tongue wiggler. Pressure.
Yes, say it
foot,
7
pressure.
times quickly.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but
you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Both on the overlocker, on the regular sewing machine, on a cover locker as well, because it really depends on what type of fabric you use, if it should be more or less pressure, and especially when it comes to knitwear. I mean, we have talked about this a lot before. But I'm gonna repeat it again. Like, the fabric will get stretched out if it's a stretchy fabric and you have a lot of pressure, because then the presser foot is pressing down the fabric so much, and the feed dog underneath is pulling it to be able to move it forward. But yeah, it doesn't move so fast because it's too much pressure, so the fabric gets stretched out. So this is the best thing if you have a little bit stretchy fabric, or both woven and jersey. Ease up with the pressure a little bit and try it on a scrap piece of fabric. Do the same amount of layers that you will sew with, and just test sew. It will help a lot.
Such a good specific tip. Unfortunately, on my sewing machine, I had an older sewing machine from the 80s. I cannot adjust the pressure
so
on my. It's so annoying,
yeah.
But of course I have it on my serger, and on the cover stitch machine it's absolutely crucial for good result. When you're hemming, you have to, that's probably one of the most underutilized function I think on many sewing machines, that we do not adjust the pressure, because that can make, as you say, a huge difference, especially when you're hemming and things like that. It's a game changer. So yeah, annoying. I love my Bernina from the 80s. There's one small flaw, but
Well,
I
it
have
can't be perfect.
workarounds.
They had
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
they had to develop those machines as well, and
Yeah.
maybe that's why there are coming new machines all the time, because they are adjusting these kind of
Yeah.
things.
Exactly. So speaking about used sewing machine, yes, I have new cover stitch and overlocker, but I've never actually bought a new sewing machine. So this is my newest sewing machine. It's from the 80s. So in this case, I'm definitely doing what I say when it comes to looking for used sewing machine. But yeah, it comes with a few cons as well, for sure. And I have also a final lesson here, which is that you're always learning. So this is to stay curious and to be open to learn new things. That despite the fact that we have been sewing and making clothes for 70 years at least, we are still always learning new stuff, and we are improving our techniques, and we maybe see a tutorial somewhere that makes us consider we could do something slightly different. For instance, in my case, I am on a journey, a lifelong journey on the best technique to sew a waistband on a pair of dress pants, so that the inner waistband looks as nice as the outer waistband. I am pretty close now, but I still feel I have a little bit room of improvement. I'm also still experimenting with the best technique to insert zippers on dress pants. And I've tried lots of different methods, and I feel like I have a pretty solid one now, but I still feel it's not quite there yet. So that's one of the things about sewing, that it's a lifelong journey, and we all have so much access to information now on all the channels. I mean, Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and sewing books, and you can take a sewing class, you can trade knowledge with your sewing friends, you have online sewing communities. Of course, pattern instructions, we have seen a lot of improvements in the pattern instructions, in especially with the movement towards indie sewing patterns. So we are now have, of course, tutorials on blogs, so we have so many options now. And also, because I would also like to say that sometimes you might feel a little bit bad that you are not able to do something as well as, for instance, maybe sew a shirt collar with a collar stand, but maybe you need to try another technique, and that will work better for your mind and your motor skills. So there's no saying that you have to just be able, there's one way right of doing it. It's much better that you find your best method, and that will probably help you achieve better result if that is something that you are striving for.
Yeah, absolutely. Always keep on learning new things, or don't stay in your comfort zone. If this is you like to sew specific things, you like to take it easy, the easy ride out, that's fine as well, if you prefer to do that. Like you do whatever you want to do, and there are so much things out there, both for free, and there are lots of like members, how do you say, member deals,
membership sites,
where you get a ton of information as well, for a very modest price, to be honest. So yeah, it's if you have a problem, someone else has probably written a blog post, or you've made a YouTube clip about it. So it's so much information out there right now.
Yeah. So don't worry if you're frustrated. As you say, Malena, someone else has had the same problems and probably have figured out a good solution. So that's what I mean when I mean that you should be open and stay curious and see if maybe there's just another way of doing something that you've struggled with, and I'm pretty sure there are.
Yeah, if you're frustrated about something, there is probably a better way for it. So yeah, definitely reach out and see what other people have done.
This was such a fun episode to do, and I think it was funny because we didn't check beforehand, but we didn't have much of an overlap, so we did have a pretty unique takes, I think, on all the lessons, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to this episode have a few insights and things that you want to share. You can definitely do that either on our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod, or over at Instagram account Stitching Tales Pod, and you can of course also email us at stitchingtalespod@gmail.com. Links are of course always in the show notes.
Yeah, it would be lovely to hear your best tip or best what have you learned during your lifetime of sewing?
Yeah, it's so fun because we trade information. And it's so good because I think for me, for instance, Malena, I should credit you. I mean, I know about the value of pressing, but I feel I always have now Malena's voice in my head. Press as you go. Press
Sorry,
as you
not
go.
sorry. That's good.
Yeah, it's a good voice to have in the head. That's a healthy voice to have in your head. That's me. That is Malena's voice. And perhaps you have, I'm sure some listeners, because this is not the first time you mentioned this, so I'm sure there are many other people out there, perhaps now having your voice about the importance of pressing.
Yeah, it is. It is important. It's the hill that I will die on.
Yeah, but it's a good hill to die on. I'm very, very grateful for that you keep on repeating this message. It definitely hit home.
Sounds lovely.
All right then. Well, thank you so much for listening. And if you want to learn more about the stuff, you can check us out. I am at thelaststitch.com, where I have my sewing books and sewing patterns and video courses and tutorials. And you, Malena, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at my website hazelhenpatterns.com or on Instagram as well, Hazelhen Patterns.
Good. Thank you so much for listening, and we talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.